half marathon, or if I need to learn a language, I sign up for a test in a year or something, just so I have motivation. So the website acts as that sort of motivation. Otherwise, I just sort of do nothing. I think not nothing, but it's yeah, and it's sort of working well. I mean, what I found is that I think the first time I ever came on Real Vision, I talked about shale with you,
That's right.
and and the thing is, like, I looked at shale and I went, "This makes no sense to me because it doesn't make any money. Why is anyone doing this?" And what was interesting is I think that was correct. There was a lot of shale companies did exactly go to the wall. They were capital destruction machines. But the weird thing I started to notice is actually it might actually be the real deal. Um, to my surprise, and it's just going through that. And when you're managing money, it's a little bit hard because if you commit to one view on something and then you raise money on the back of that view, uh, the the threshold for you changing your opinion suddenly goes through the roof because you're going to go back to people and say, oh, actually, shale is the real deal. Whereas when you're sort of more sort of independent and free, you can look at it and go, actually, the data now is coming in very differently to how I expected. And that's exactly what's happened recently. It's like, I must say, I thought when they started to go through this huge inventory of old wells in this drilled uncompleted wells in the States, I thought they were going to find that these wells were empty. They had no oil or gas. They were just drilled to raise money. And so you'd see productivity collapse. And the opposite's actually happened. Productivity's sort of gone up a lot. And that's been like also sort of mind opening for me because it explains a lot of these sort of weird things. Like I look at US budget deficit, you could look at the Fed, I look at, a lot of things and think, God, the dollar should just get absolutely crushed. And all it does is stay very strong and very strong against, currencies like Russian ruble, Turkish lira, of course. But it's, I think perhaps we're in the shale revolution. I suspect maybe I've underestimated. And again, it just feeds back into this.
What you're thinking is US energy independence is a larger factor than people imagine. Therefore, the US is exporting less dollars into the world. Is that part of the thesis?
What I've found is extending an idea too far that, like, okay, they're not going to export dollars and there's not enough dollars. And I like that extension because I find that the they're not exactly joined up. There's an idea behind them that's okay, but it's not exactly joined up. I think a much better way of thinking about it is the shale technology works. It does keep increasing productivity, but the only country with the infrastructure to use it properly is the US. So this gives them a long-term structural energy advantage in, and you can really see it. I think I say since through some research to you, but it's been staggering to see like natural gas LNG prices in Europe and Asia tripling, quadrupling in some cases, and US prices are still around the $5 per cubic feet type thing. And when I look at shale, what I expected to see is maybe natural gas prices stay low, but oil prices moving much higher because shale is naturally much better for gas than for oil. But what we see is U.S. energy prices stay relatively low, and so the world that we are used to from like the 70s onwards, when the U.S. was reliant on energy imports, maybe that's dead. Maybe that's what we're seeing, is that now the U.S. doesn't need to rely on foreigners for anything really because they export food. Now export energy. Maybe the world we lived in is now dead. And I like that because the world has changed. The financial world has changed substantially from how it used to trade maybe 10, 5, 6, 7 years ago.
Is that also part of the ongoing breaking of supply chains or regionalization of supply chains? Is that how we can think about this? Because that's definitely something that's been underway. Trump accelerated, but it feels like that's going to continue.
Yeah, I must say my line of thinking is that I would say, you and I would have come of age in an era of free markets, right? Where the idea was both capital and industry should move to where it was most efficient, and create a world that where efficiency was prized over all things, and that world was sort of conjured into existence and policed, I think, by the states. And I think that world was conjured into existence because it suited what America needed. So in the 70s and 80s, they were reliant on foreign supplies of commodities. And so they wanted that to be as cheap and as efficiently priced as possible. But also, I think politically, we were coming from an environment in the post-World War II period where labor had a lot of political power. And that political power was expressed in both full employment and rising wages and a growing profit share, to labor. And so I think there were these two things came together where suddenly politics in the US was focusing on A, reducing the power of labor, and B, reducing the price of commodities to the lowest degree possible, to create a deflationary environment. And that was the world we lived in. So what that world meant was that governments would actually encourage unemployment from time to time via raising interest rates, via fiscal austerity, all the things that we now look as bad things. Central banks tell us they're bad, governments tell us they're bad, but they were there to encourage this sort of deflationary environment. And I used to think this was the natural way of the world, but it was a world that was just met the political needs that we had at the time. And you can see that now in that, when I look at the US now, it's like budget deficits don't matter, interest rate policy doesn't matter. The political need seems to be driven almost exclusively by having asset prices as high as possible to maximize the wealth of the state or of the US as much as possible. But then now, because of energy independence, they can, destroy trade with Russia, and that's not really a big deal politically or for the markets. There are some other angles I'm looking at that, which I find very interesting. But, when I traded them a few years ago, in a free market world, they would have led to huge bankruptcies. But it seems we're in a world where bankruptcy, particularly for wealthy people, is just considered a bad or a policy mistake.